Hey friends, Ari Koinuma here, and thanks for tuning into my channel. Today is the second episode in my series about putting together a home recording studio. And while I don't consider myself like a dedicated recording engineer, and there are much better, more qualified people who can give you advices on things like the latest gear and recording and engineering technique and things like that. I have been recording myself in a home situation for like 30 years now, and I just released a single under my name Aristotle's Hope. The single is called Balloon Popper Abandoned Cardboards, and I hope you check it out. I hope you agree that for my modest studio I get very good value out of it. So instead of trying to sort of offer the same kind of content as everybody else, if you know me, I like to just think through these things. So I wanted to create a series on how to think through this myriad of decisions that you have to make when you're putting together a recording studio at home, so that you can sort of walk through it with me and use that as a sort of a guideline and companion about what to think about when you're trying to put together home recording studio, so it can help you make all these decisions. And today we're going to talk about the room. So there are two major sound acoustics type considerations when we're thinking about the room in which the home recording studio is going to be. And while most of us, if you're putting together a home recording studio, might not have a really decision to make, right? I mean, unless you have such abundant number of rooms that you can make a choice as to where you're going to set up the studio, you're just stuck with whichever room is available, right? Nevertheless, these are useful things to think about and consider when you're thinking about the room in which you're going to put up the home recording studio. So the first issue that we need to consider is the soundproofing. Or another way to put it is the issue of noise from the outside the room coming in and the noise of the room going outside. And again, for most of us with limited budget or finite budget, it's probably not really in the cards to like tear down the walls to a room and rebuild it with all that necessary acoustic insulation to cut down on the noise being coming in or out from the room. But you just still want to think about, okay, so what are the noises coming into the room? Again, if you watched my last episode, you thought about like how loud is your source, like how loud is your instruments, versus again, what kind of noise exists outside the room and may come into the room, right? If you're recording, for example, loud electric guitar amp, right, and close micing it, then maybe the outside noise is not so much an issue, but you might want to think about how you can minimize or prevent that noise going out, because that will be the problem. Whereas if you are recording quiet sources like nylon string classical guitar, which is pretty soft, then everything from like the air conditioning or room heating noise to refrigerator next door to cars driving by outside might get picked up, right? Or most of us in many of the parts of the world, don't get to live in standalone houses, right? So then like the noises of the neighbor upstairs, neighbor next door in an apartment situation or condominiums, that could all be a factor. Obviously, when you are in a room, so let's say I'm here in a room and these are the walls of the room, right? Sounds coming in sounds going out is you rely on the walls to sort of minimize this transfer of the noise. But we're kind of at the mercy of how that wall is kind of built. There might be some things that you can do. Really, you're really at the mercy of how the wall is and the situation outside the room here. There's probably not a too impactful of a thing to do to the walls to help cut down this transfer of the noise if that happens. There are things, of course, you can do that we'll talk about later in terms of what to do with inside walls, but that is not for the purpose of soundproofing, meaning reduce the amount of noise being transferred in or out. Like, one thing you could do, for example, is if the door is one place where, obviously this is very thin, right? So you might want to pad it with like thick blankets inside out, or like you might want to seal the openings at the top or the bottom of the door so that less noise goes out, that kind of thing. That could help. But yeah, the walls themselves, you have to do something really drastic if the noise comes in and out, and if you want to cut it out. But you just want to think about, if you have a choice as to where to put the room, again, knowing that the noise going in and out may not be able to be changed drastically, so your best bet is to choose a room where there's as little outside noise as possible coming in, and if noise goes out of the room, there's as little disturbance as possible. And things like when you plan to record also comes into the factor with that consideration as well. Okay, so the second factor to consider is the audio treatment. And this refers to the fact that sound bounces off the walls inside the room. So you might be playing a guitar here, right? And then all that sound kind of bounce off the walls and come back and gets picked up by a microphone, right? Don't mind my drawings. And this is undesirable in recording because then you're stuck with whatever the room sound is. Another place where this becomes a factor is if you're trying to mix your recording in your studio, right? And it doesn't matter how good or expensive of studio monitors, the speakers you get, and the sound coming out of the speakers bounces off the walls and affects how you perceive the mix, and again, very undesirable. So this is a part, the audio treatment is something that you can do a lot to affect. So one sort of a basic sanity check is if you go into a room and if you clap and you can hear the reverb or the echo in the room, right? If the idea is that if you hear, if you have a clap and then you don't hear anything, it's just there's no echo going on. And this is a very live room that we're in, so I'm sure you can pick up the echo in here. I can try this test in my studio. Last time I checked, there was just a tiny bit of echo still in my studio space, but I'm so far getting away with it now. I'll explain why in a little bit. But if you want to kill the reverberation in the room so that you are free to sort of apply whatever is the appropriate reverb and appropriate amount of reverb in the mix so that you can get the right sound. And if you have the room noise, while the room sound sounds more natural because it is an organic reverb, you're just stuck with it, right? I mean, you can't take it off once it's recorded. the basic rule of the thumb is that if, and most of the time I assume that we're close miking, right? If you are close miking, the smaller the room is, the more thoroughly you have to cover every surface available that is hard and can bounce off the sound. So, because in smaller rooms, there's what we call standing waves, like the parallel walls, the sound can bounce back and forth between them. Especially low frequency sounds can kind of go back and forth between them and create this kind of a, almost like a feedback. Not quite as obvious as that, but so that's a problem. It's just that the sound bouncing back to your ears from the walls come back faster because it is, smaller room, shorter distance between your ears and walls. So you will have to cover your walls thoroughly to make small rooms treated properly for recording and mixing. For larger rooms, you can get away with less, a little bit. The low frequencies will be less of an issue, and it takes more time for the sound to come back to your ear. And if you do still want to treat it, but if you treat it so that like the reverb is pretty subtle, and if you're close miking it, it might not matter as much. And even when you're listening to it with your speakers will hit the ears first and fast, and then the gentle and soft reverb takes longer and is less to come back. So my experience with, like my current studio, which I show you, is kind of in a fairly large space from my experience. It was really high ceiling. So I didn't cover every surface, and I recorded it, I mixed my single, and it came out fine. So I was really pleased with that. So the basic rule of thumb again is the audio treatment the purpose is to kill the reverb. Like putting the material on the walls to kill the reverb really doesn't affect the soundproofing, it doesn't really contribute to it, but it is really important. And the smaller the room is, and the harder the surfaces, the more thoroughly you have to cover the walls with the audio treatment so that you can kill the reverb. You've seen a lot of like YouTube videos in library kind of situation where there's a lot of, the walls are covered with bookshelves full of books, right? I mean, that is like a good audio treatment as well. Like you can experience library and how quiet and dead the place might be, right? Because all those books made up of dense paper, they just suck the sound and it just kills the reverb. So that is another way to put it. The lower the frequencies are, the denser material you need to kill the reverb. And the reason why, for example, the right angles in the corner of the room can have these low frequencies that can get stuck there. So you don't want to have, you want to reduce the number of right angles in the room and sort of put in the densest, thickest material there so that you can kill as much of the low-end frequency echoes that can sort of bounce off of each other in those places. Okay, so we're looking at my humble bedroom studio, and let's look at this audio treatment here. So well, the unfortunate thing about my bedroom is that it has these large windows on the north and the west side. Not exactly the greatest place to put windows in the northern climate. And then on the north side, we have a garage right outside. On the west side, there is a neighbor's house right next door. So it's not something where I would actually open the window very much. I love the natural light, but windows, obviously you don't want to cover it up permanently. Well, we could with audio panels. So I'm planning to get thick curtains to put on them so that I can kill some high frequency reverbs from there. But that being said, I recorded vocals here. It was fine. So I have those red panels are my corner bass traps, and then the yellow panels are just the wall covering, and I just kind of covered up whatever the wall space that I could cover. This is a very old house and has a really tall ceiling, which is something I love, the sense of space here, but those panels are like 4 feet tall, so it's probably like 9 feet tall ceiling here. And the most important part is these areas behind the speakers, and then what we call the first reflection is also something of a concern. So wherever your speakers are pointed, you might want to sort of treat it so that the very first reverb or echo that comes back from there, you might not hear it, or you can diffuse it. But that being said, I don't mix very loud, and that speaker placement, I realize, is not ideal right now. That is actually a motorized desk that I sort of stand and sit on. So I plan to maybe get like a stands that attach to the desk itself eventually, and so that the speakers can go up and down with my desk, because I don't really like sitting for that long. Anyway, but this room so far worked out okay. I just yeah, covered up whatever the wall space that I have, and if I cover up the windows, I think that will be even better. Okay, so if I do the clap test here, I think I do hear just a little bit high frequency. So ideal is to get it totally dead so that you don't hear any reverb, but so far it's been working. This is a material called rock wool, and I got them in a large batch from a vendor, and then I just bought 1x6s for the deeper ones, where I used 2 batches or bats of them for the bass trap on the corners. And I also have a 1x4 frames that I use only 1 bat for. See, let's see if I can get this sort of show you what this looks like. It's not the greatest things to breathe, so it's, but you know, it's been fine once it's covered up. I don't have to like worry about it. Okay, so it looks like this, right? It's about 2 inches deep, and I use 2 of them for those that are in the corner. And I just bought some fabric from Joanne and just cover it up. And honestly, I spent about $1,000 total initially with the installation and the frames and everything, and spent a couple of days putting them all together. I have a lot more than I need right now, but if I were to do it over again, I might buy more ready-made audio treatment panels from notable vendors, but those things were not cheap either. So for what I spent, I got a lot of panels made, and I imagine that I'll probably use them the rest of my life. Honestly, I think a recording studio is only as good as the audio treatments done to it. So audio treatment is not something to be really considered lightly. It can really make or break your ability to record professional quality audio in your studio. So that's something to really think about. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks again for watching. If you have any questions or comments, or if there are things that you know, or if there are things that could be improved upon in terms of what I said, Again, please leave me a comment and I will respond as I can. Alright, thanks again. I'll see you next time.